He had paid for first class, just like everyone else. But the moment he tried to sit down, the flight crew told him those seats weren't for people like him. Laughter, whispers, humiliation, right in front of dozens of passengers. What they didn't know was that the man they were mocking wasn't just another passenger. He was the CEO of one of the largest companies funding the airline's future. And within minutes, the entire flight and one arrogant pilot's career would come crashing down. Marcus Allen wasn't new to disrespect. Growing up in a small town, he had spent his life proving people wrong. From being underestimated in school to being denied opportunities in college, he had fought through every barrier. Now, he was the CEO of a billion-dollar technology firm, one that had just signed a massive deal with the very airline he was flying with. That day, he was traveling on business, headed to a high-stakes meeting in another city. The airline had offered him first-class seats as part of their partnership. It wasn't about luxury. It was about respect, about being treated with the dignity he had earned. He walked onto the plane calmly, wearing a tailored suit, carrying a simple leather briefcase. But from the moment he approached the first-class cabin, he could feel the stares. Some passengers shifted uncomfortably. A flight attendant gave him a look that lingered too long, as if silently questioning his place. When Marcus placed his bag in the overhead bin and moved toward his seat, the tension snapped. The flight attendant stepped forward sharply, blocking his way. "Sir, I think you're in the wrong section. Economy is behind you." Marcus paused. He smiled politely, handed her his boarding pass. "No, I'm right where I'm supposed to." "B." She looked at the ticket, then at him, then back at the ticket again, her face tightening. Instead of apologizing, she doubled down. "These seats are reserved. You need to move." Passengers nearby watched, some whispering. Marcus felt his chest tighten. He had lived this moment before, people assuming he didn't belong, questioning. His success reducing him to nothing more than the color of his skin. But this time, the stakes were higher. The whispers spread like wildfire. A man in a business suit leaned over to his wife and muttered, "Probably upgraded with points." Another shook his head and chuckled. Someone else pulled out a phone, recording the scene. Marcus stayed calm. Years of boardroom battles had taught him the power of patience. But inside, the storm was building. The flight attendant called for backup. Soon, the captain himself appeared, tall, with a stiff walk and a look of annoyance. He glanced at Marcus as if he were a problem, not a passenger. "What seems to be the issue?" he asked. The attendant handed him the boarding pass. "He's trying to sit in first class without authorization." Marcus stood tall. "I paid for this seat. It's mine." The captain didn't even look at the ticket. Instead, he gave Marcus a dismissive smile, one that dripped with arrogance. "Sir, let's not make this harder than it has to be. We need you to move." A hush fell across the cabin. Some passengers looked uncomfortable. Others nodded approvingly, as if the captain were doing the right thing. Marcus's jaw tightened. He could have argued, could have raised his voice, but instead he reached into his pocket and calmly pulled out his phone. The captain frowned. "What are you doing?" Marcus spoke quietly, but firmly. "Making a call." He dialed a number. 1. He knew by heart. The voice on the other end answered almost instantly. "Allen here. Ground every plane from this airline until I say otherwise." The captain blinked. "Excuse me?" Passengers looked around, confused. Some laughed nervously, thinking it was a bluff. But it wasn't. Within minutes, Marcus's company, responsible for critical aviation software, issued a directive. Planes preparing for takeoff were delayed. Runways slowed, and the airline's command center was thrown into chaos. The captain's confident smile began to fade. The flight attendant's face turned pale. Even the whispering passengers grew quiet, sensing that something bigger than they understood was happening. Marcus remained seated, his eyes locked on the captain. The silence in the cabin was deafening. Just 12 minutes after being told he didn't belong, Marcus had turned the entire flight into a standstill. The pilot's authority, once absolute, now looked fragile. A supervisor arrived from the gate, breathless, holding a phone. She whispered urgently into the captain's ear. His face drained of color. Passengers leaned in, straining to hear. A ripple of shock ran through the cabin as the news spread. The airline had confirmed the truth. Marcus Allen wasn't just a passenger. He was their largest corporate client, the man whose company held the keys to their future. The captain tried to recover, mumbling something about protocol and misunderstanding, but the words fell flat. Everyone knew what had really happened. Marcus hadn't been denied his seat because of a mistake. He had been denied because of prejudice. And now, the man they had tried to humiliate had the power to ground them all. Marcus stood slowly, his voice steady but heavy with emotion. For years, I've worked harder than most people in this room can imagine. I've built something from nothing. And yet even here, even now, I'm told I don't belong. The silence was absolute. No one dared to move. He turned to the captain. You don't get to decide where I belong. Not anymore. The airline had no choice. The pilot and flight attendant were removed from duty before the plane even left the gate. Passengers whispered, some ashamed, others stunned. A few even applauded Marcus quietly, realizing they had just witnessed something extraordinary. Marcus didn't stay for the applause. He gathered his bag, walked calmly down the jet bridge, and disappeared into the terminal. Hours later, headlines exploded across the country. Black CEO grounds flight after racist incident. Airline faces backlash over first-class discrimination. The captain's career was effectively over. The flight attendant was fired. The airline's executives scrambled to contain the public relations disaster. But for Marcus, it wasn't about revenge. It was about sending a message, one louder than any speech he could give. That message was simple. Dignity is not negotiable. In boardrooms, in airports, in every corner of society, prejudice still lingers. It hides behind polite smiles, misunderstandings, and rules twisted to exclude. But when confronted, when exposed, it crumbles. Marcus knew this wasn't the end. There would be other battles, other humiliations, other fights to prove his worth. But he also knew that with every stand taken, with every injustice exposed, the world moved one step closer to change. So the next time someone tells you that you don't belong, remember Marcus. Remember the man who turned humiliation into power, who grounded a plane with nothing more than his dignity and his refusal to be silent. The question is, how many more times will this story repeat before society finally learns? If stories like, this move you, pause right now, hit like, drop a comment, and subscribe to stand against injustice. Be part of a community that refuses to stay silent.